The enforcer swept his arm across the display case and sent a tray of fresh cuts crashing to the floor, then leaned across the glass and told Harper Blake she could pay this week or bleed next week. She did not step back. She did not raise her voice. She kept one hand flat on the counter and the other resting near the knife. "Say that again," she said quietly, slower. "Before we go on, please subscribe to the channel and follow this story all the way to the end. And comment the city you are watching from so I can see how far this story has traveled. Now stay close because the man who came to break her had no idea who she really was." The enforcer straightened up and laughed the kind of laugh a man uses when he needs to remind himself he is not afraid. His name was Gino, and he had been sent to Blake Prime Cuts because it was supposed to be simple. A small shop, a dead man's daughter running it now, a woman who by every report handed up the chain, was soft, quiet, alone, and easy. "You heard me the first time," Gino said. "You don't make me repeat things." "I heard you," Harper said. "I just wanted to give you a chance to hear yourself." She bent down without hurrying and began picking up the cuts he had knocked to the floor. She did not slam them. She did not throw them. She lifted each piece, checked it, and set the ruined ones aside in a bin, the way a person sorts laundry. Gino watched her do it, and something in the calm of it bothered him more than shouting would have. "You think this is a joke?" he said. "No," Harper said. "I think you cost me about $40, and you're going to keep talking like that money already belongs to somebody else." "It does." Gino spread his arms wide, taking in the shop, the counter, the hooks along the back, the old brass register her father had refused to replace for 30 years. "All of this, every block on this street, it belongs to Mr. Moretti now, and Mr. Moretti likes his rent paid on time." "My father paid nobody," Harper said. "Your father is dead." She stood up then, slow, holding the bin of ruined meat, and looked at him. It was not a dramatic look. It was worse than that. It was the look of a woman deciding exactly how much of her afternoon this man was worth. "Say his name again," she said. Gino heard the shift in her voice and did not understand it, so he did what men like him do when they do not understand something. He got louder. He came around the end of the counter, into the space behind it, into her space, and he jabbed a finger toward her chest. "You listen to me, fat girl," he said. "You think anybody in this city cares about a butcher who can't fit through her own door? You think you scare me? You're going to smile, you're going to nod, and every Friday you're going to hand over an envelope, or I'm going to come back and I'm going to feed you to your own grinder. You understand me?" The shop went quiet. Harper set the bin down on the counter. She did it gently, and then she wiped her hands on the towel at her waist, one finger at a time, taking her time, and Gino should have understood what that meant, but he had never in his life met a woman who did not flinch when he stepped close. "I've been called fat since I was 9 years old," Harper said, "by kids, by teachers, by a doctor once who forgot I could hear him. You are not creative. You are not the first. You are not even the worst one this week." She tilted her head. "So no, that's not the part that's going to make me pay you." "There is no part," Gino said. "There's just the money." "There's always a part," Harper said. "You just came in too loud to find it." He grabbed her arm. That was his mistake, and it was the last free choice he made in that shop. Harper did not pull away. Pulling away is what they expect. Instead, she turned into him, which no frightened person ever does, and the moment her weight shifted, he felt the whole room tilt. She was not small. She had never been small, and every ounce of her that men had spent years mocking, she now put behind one clean, economical movement that folded his wrist backward against the joint until his fingers opened on their own. Gino yelped. It was an ugly high sound, nothing like the voice he had come in with. "You want to know the part?" Harper asked, still calm, her mouth close to his ear. Now because she had brought him down to her level without him quite understanding how. "The part is that my father didn't teach me to cut meat. He taught me to cut. There is a difference, and you just walked into a shop full of knives and put your hand on the one person in this neighborhood who knows exactly how a body comes apart." "Let go," Gino gasped. "Let go of me, you crazy." She let go. She let go so fast that he stumbled, caught himself on the steel table, and knocked over a rack of tools that rang against the floor. He came up with a knife of his own, a folding blade he flicked open with a shaking hand, and he pointed it at her, breathing hard, humiliated in a way that made him dangerous. "I'll kill you," he said. Harper did not reach for a weapon. She looked at the blade in his hand, then at his face, then back at the blade, and she almost seemed disappointed. "No, you won't," she said. "You're holding it wrong." "What?" "You're holding it like you want to scare me. If you wanted to kill me, you'd hold it low and you'd already be moving. You're not moving. You're waiting for me to say sorry so you can leave and tell your boss you handled it." She folded her arms. "So say what you came to say, walk out and tell him whatever you need to tell him. But you're not getting an envelope from me. Not this Friday, not ever." For a second, the whole thing balanced on the edge of nothing. Gino's arm was up. The blade caught the light, and in that second he saw her decide that if he took one more step, she would take his knife and she would use it and she would not lose 1 hour of sleep over it. He saw it because it was true. Gino lowered the blade. He backed toward the door, still pointing, it still needing to feel like he was leaving on his own terms. "You have no idea," he said, "what you just did." "I picked up my meat off the floor," Harper said. "You made a mess. I cleaned it. That's the whole story." "Mr. Moretti is going to come here himself." Something flickered across her face then. Not fear, interest. The way a person looks up when a name they have been waiting for is finally spoken out loud. "Good," Harper said. "Send him and tell him to come alone next time if he wants to be able to hear his own thoughts." "Because you can't." Gino left. The little bell over the door, the one her father had hung the year she was born, rang behind him, and then the shop was quiet again, and Harper stood alone, with the ruined cuts and the tools scattered across the floor, and the slow, steady thud of her own heart, which had not sped up once, not even when the blade came out. She should have been shaking. A normal person would have been shaking. Harper picked up the tools instead one by one, and put each back in its place because a mess left on the floor is how accidents happen, and her father had taught her that before she could read. Word traveled that same afternoon. It traveled the way it always does in a neighborhood like that one, mouth to mouth, faster than any phone. By evening, the woman who ran the corner grocery 2 doors down had heard 3 versions of it, each one bigger than the last. In one version, Harper had broken the enforcer's arm. In another, she had put a cleaver through the counter an inch from his hand. In the biggest version, the one that stuck, she had put him on his knees and made him apologize, and he had cried. None of them were exactly true. All of them were exactly true enough. Old Mr. Delgado, who had run the shoe repair across the street for 40 years, and had been paying the Morettis for 2 of them because he was 78 and had a bad hip and no more fight left in him, came shuffling into Blake Prime Cuts an hour before closing. He did not buy anything. He stood at the counter and looked at Harper for a long moment, and his eyes were wet. "Is it true?" he asked. "Is what true?" "You told them no." Harper set down the cloth she was using to wipe the case. "I told one of them no," she said. "That's all." "You know what they do," Delgado said, and his voice cracked. "You know what happens to people who tell them no. Your father, God rest him, he was smart. He kept his head down. My father did not keep his head down." Harper said sharper than she meant to, and then she stopped and softened because it was not this old man's fault. I'm sorry, Mr. Delgado. Sit down. Let me get you some water." "I don't want water. I want to understand what you think is going to happen now." Harper came around the counter. She pulled out the stool she kept for herself, the one she almost never sat on, and she guided the old man onto it, and she crouched down in front of him so he would not have to look up. "Nothing's going to happen to you," she said. "Whatever comes, it comes to me. Not to you, not to your shop. That's a promise." "You can't promise that." "I can," Harper said. "You don't know why yet, but I can." Delgado searched her face for the fear he expected to find there, the fear he had lived with for 2 years, and he did not find it, and it unsettled him more than any threat. "You're a strange girl, Harper Blake," he said finally. "So people keep telling me." He left, and she locked the door behind him and turned the sign, and then she stood alone in the empty shop and let out one long breath, and only then, only when no one could see her, did she allow herself to feel the size of what she had started. Because Mr. Delgado was right about one thing. She knew exactly what they did. She had grown up knowing. She had grown up with a father who came home some nights with things on his clothes he would not explain, a father who taught his heavy, quiet daughter how to hold a knife the way other fathers teach their sons to throw a ball. She had not chosen this, she had inherited it, and she had spent 10 years trying to be nothing but a butcher, a good one, an ordinary one, hoping the other thing would stay buried with the man who put it in her. And then Gino had come in and knocked her father's work onto the floor. Harper went to the back of the shop, to the little office where the ledgers were kept, and she opened the bottom drawer of her father's desk, the one that stuck, and she took out the thing wrapped in oilcloth that she had not touched in a year. She unwrapped it on the desk. She did not pick it up. She just looked at it, at the worn handle her father's hand had shaped at the blade that had never once been used to cut food. "I hoped it would stay in the drawer," she said to the empty room, to him wherever he was. "I really did." Then she wrapped it back up and she put it away and she went home. Across the city in a very different kind of room, Gino was standing in front of a man who did not raise his voice either, but for entirely different reasons. Vincent Moretti was 36 years old and had been the head of the family for exactly 19 days. He had come up faster than anyone liked because the old boss, his uncle, had gone to prison and named him instead of the men who had waited their whole lives for the chair. There were people at that table who smiled at Vincent and would have cut his throat for a nickel. He knew all of their names. He was not a stupid man. He was, if anything, the smartest one in the room, and he hated that he had to prove it every single day. "Say it again," Vincent said. It was the second time that day a person in Boston had said those exact words to Gino, and he liked it no better the second time. "The butcher," Gino said. "The Blake girl. She refused." "Refused?" "She wouldn't pay. She got physical, boss. She's not right in the head. She got physical." Vincent leaned back in his chair. There were two other men in the room, older men who had known his uncle, and he could feel them watching to see how the new boss handled a foot soldier who had failed. "You went into a butcher shop to collect from one woman, and you're standing here telling me she got physical." "She knows how to fight, boss. I'm telling you." She grabbed my wrist and "Show me your wrist." Gino held it out. It was swollen, already going purple, the joint clearly wrenched. The room was quiet. One of the older men made a small sound, not quite a laugh, and Vincent's eyes flicked to him and the sound stopped. "So let me understand this," Vincent said, standing now, coming around the desk. 19 days. 19 days I've had this chair. And the first story that's going to go around this city about me, the first thing men are going to whisper in the back rooms, is that a fat girl with a meat cleaver bent my collector's arm and sent him home crying. That's the story you brought me. "I didn't cry, boss." "I don't care if you cried." Vincent's voice dropped, and that was worse. "I care that she's alive and talking, and every shop owner on that street heard about it before dinner. Do you understand what happens now? Delgado stops paying, the grocery stops paying, the laundromat, the bar, all of them. They start to think, and a paying neighborhood that starts to think is the most expensive thing in the world. You want me to go back and..." "No?" Vincent held up a hand. "No, I don't want you to go back. You've done enough. If I send you back and you fail again, I have to kill you, and I don't want to kill you this week. I have too much going on." He said it flatly, the way another man might say he was too busy for lunch, and Gino went pale. "I'll handle the butcher myself." The older man who had almost laughed spoke up now. His name was Sal, and he had wanted the chair, and everyone knew it. "The boss doesn't collect rent from butchers," Sal said mildly, poisonously. "That's beneath you, Vincent. Send Marco. Send anybody. You go down there yourself. You make her important." Vincent looked at him for a long moment. "She's already important, Sal," he said. "Your problem is you can't see why. A woman who isn't afraid of us is the most dangerous thing on that street because fear is the only thing we sell. If people find out it's optional, we're finished. So no, I don't send Marco. I look her in the eye and I find out what she is. Because a butcher doesn't do what she did to Gino. A butcher runs. She didn't run." He turned back to the window. "She wanted him to go home and tell me. That's what bothers me. She wanted me to come." Sal said nothing, but he filed it away the way he filed everything for the day. It would be useful against the young boss he intended to bury. "Get out," Vincent said. "All of you. I need to think." They left, and Vincent Moretti stood alone in his own kind of empty room on the other side of a city from a woman he had never met, and he did the one thing no one at that table would have believed of him. He got curious. Harper opened the shop the next morning at 6, the same as every morning. She did not carry a weapon. She did not lock herself in. She swept the front steps, she turned on the case lights, she set out the day's work, and she waited because she knew someone would come. She just did not know which someone. The morning regulars came first. Mrs. Okafor for her Sunday roast 3 days early because her grandchildren were visiting. The two firefighters off the night shift who bought sausage and called her ma'am even though she was younger than both of them. And every one of them, she noticed, lingered a little longer than usual. Every one of them looked at her a little differently. Word had reached them too. "You be careful, honey," Mrs. Okafor said at the door, gripping Harper's forearm with a strength that surprised. "You hear me? These are not men you win against. You win the first round and they take the whole rest of your life." "I hear you," Harper said. "You don't, though. I can see it in your face. You think you're different." Harper smiled, and it was a real smile, and it was the saddest thing Mrs. Okafor had seen in weeks. "No, ma'am," Harper said. "I think I'm exactly the same. That's the problem." Mrs. Okafor did not understand that. She left anyway. The morning went on. He came at 11. Harper knew it was him before the door was fully open, before the bell finished ringing, because the whole quality of the street changed when the two men stepped out of the car and stood on either side of him. She knew it the way you know a storm is coming from the pressure in the air. She kept working. She had a side of beef broken down halfway, and she did not stop because stopping was the same as bowing, and she had promised an old man she would not bow. Vincent Moretti walked into Blake Prime Cuts and stopped just inside the door, and he looked at her, and for a moment neither of them said anything at all. He was not what she expected. She had built a picture in her mind of a heavy, loud man, a man like Gino but older. And instead there was this, a man who filled the doorway without trying, in a black suit and an open white collar. Dark hair pushed back a beard, trimmed close-ink. She could see at his throat and along the backs of his hands. He was younger than she thought a boss would be, and his eyes, when they landed on her, did not do the things she was used to. They did not slide down her body and dismiss her. They looked at her hands, at the knife, at the way she stood. He was reading her the same way she was reading him. That was new. That was interesting. And it was the most dangerous thing that had happened to her in 10 years. "You're the one," Vincent said. "Not a question." "I'm a lot of things," Harper said and kept cutting. "You'll have to be specific." "You put Gino on the floor." Gino put himself on the floor. He knocked over my product, he grabbed my arm, and he found out that grabbing a stranger's arm has consequences. She finished a cut, wiped the blade on her towel, and finally looked up at him. "You must be the boss he kept threatening me with. You're younger than he made you sound." One of the enforcers behind Vincent shifted his weight, and Harper's eyes went to him for half a second, cataloging him, then came back. "You should be afraid," Vincent said. "Probably," Harper agreed. "A lot of people tell me that. My mother used to tell me that. God rest her, she was afraid enough for the both of us her whole life, and it didn't buy her one extra day." She set the knife down deliberately in full view, taking her hand off it, and that told Vincent more than picking it up would have. She was telling him she did not need it. "So you came yourself. Gino said you might. I have to admit, I didn't think you actually would. Bosses don't do their own collecting." "No," Vincent said. "They don't. So why are you here?" And Vincent Moretti, who had not planned to be honest, who had come with a whole script about consequences and examples and what happens to people who embarrass the family, found himself telling her the truth, and he did not fully understand why. "Because I wanted to see you," he said, "with my own eyes. You're a problem I can't solve from a distance." "I'm not a problem," Harper said. "I'm a butcher who wants to be left alone." "People who want to be left alone pay the money and keep their heads down," Vincent said, taking one step further into the shop. "They don't send my men home wounded. They don't make speeches. You wanted the whole street to hear what you did. Now every shop on this block is looking out their windows this morning, wondering if they have to keep paying me. You didn't just say no, you started something. So no, you don't want to be left alone. You want a war. I'm just trying to figure out why." Harper was quiet for a moment. He was good. She had to give him that. Gino had come in with a hammer. This one came in with a scalpel, and he had already cut closer to the truth in 2 minutes than the entire neighborhood had in 24 hours. "You know what my father did for a living?" she asked. "He was a butcher." "He was a butcher," Harper agreed. Everybody knew that. That was the answer he gave, and it was even true. Blake Prime Cuts, best shop in Southie. He fed this whole neighborhood for 30 years. She came around the counter now, slow, and both enforcers tensed, and Vincent did not, and she noticed that too. But that wasn't all he did. and you're standing in his shop threatening his daughter, so I think you should know the rest before you decide how brave you're feeling today. Enlighten me, Vincent said. Not yet, Harper said. I don't tell that story to men who came in with backup. Send them outside. Vincent almost laughed. You want me to send my men outside? I want you to prove you're the smartest man in the room like I think you are, Harper said. Because if you're not, this is going to go badly for you, and I'd rather it didn't. I've had a long week already. The two enforcers looked at Vincent. Vincent looked at Harper, and in his mind very fast he ran the same calculations she had watched Gino fail to run the day before. She was one woman. She had set the knife down. She was by every measure that should have mattered harmless. And yet every instinct that had kept him alive in a business that killed young men for sport was telling him that this woman had already decided how the next 30 seconds would go, and he was only now being invited to catch up. Wait outside, Vincent said. Boss, outside. They went. The bell rang. And then it was just the two of them. The Mafia boss and the butcher alone in the quiet shop with the morning light coming through the front glass and the smell of clean steel and cold meat, and Harper Blake looked at Vincent Moretti and felt something she had promised herself she would never feel again. She felt seen. She hated it. She hated that it was him of all people, a man whose name meant broken families and empty chairs. She hated that he had walked in and looked at her hands before her body. She hated that some starved, buried part of her, the part that had spent a whole life being the funny one, the safe one, the one nobody chose, had sat up the instant his eyes read her like she was worth reading. She pushed it down. She had a lot of practice pushing things down. All right, Vincent said. They're gone. So tell me, what was the rest of what your father did? Harper walked to the door. She turned the lock. She flipped the sign to close right in front of him, right in front of his men standing on the other side of the glass. And she saw both of them reach for their jackets and saw Vincent lift one hand without turning to hold them still. He trusted his read of her more than his own safety. That was either the bravest thing she had ever seen or the stupidest, and she genuinely could not tell which yet. Sit down, Harper said, gesturing to the stool. I'll stand. Suit yourself. She leaned back against the counter and folded her arms. My father's name was Thomas Blake. That's the name on the shop. But before I was born, before the shop, he worked for some very serious people. Not Italian, Irish. The old crews, the ones that ran this city before your family ever crossed the water. And he wasn't a shooter, and he wasn't muscle. He was the man they called after. You understand what I'm saying? When something went wrong, when there was a mess, when there was a person who needed to stop being a person and start being a problem that never existed, they called my father. And my father made it so there was nothing to find. No body, no trace, nothing. He was the best there ever was at it, and the reason you've never heard his name is that he was so good nobody ever needed to say it. Vincent's face did not change, but something behind his eyes did. That's a big story, he said, for a woman I've never heard of. It's a true one, Harper said. And here's the part that should worry you. He couldn't stop being a father just because of what he was. So he taught me. All of it. Not to make me like him. He hated it, actually. He cried about it once, drunk, told me he was sorry. But he was more afraid of leaving me defenseless in a world full of men like you than he was of what teaching me might do. So I know anatomy. I know exactly where a body is soft and where it's strong. I know how long it takes. I know how to make sure no one is afraid to keep talking, and I know how to make sure they never talk again. I've never used it on a living person, but I was raised by a man who used it on a lot of them, and I promise you, Mr. Moretti, I did not forget a single lesson. The shop was very quiet. You're bluffing, Vincent said, but he said it slowly. Maybe, Harper said. You want to find out the way Gino did? He grabbed my arm, and I could have taken it off at the elbow. I let him keep it because I'm trying to run a business, not a graveyard. But you came into my father's shop, and you locked eyes with me, and you told me I should be afraid. So I'm going to tell you the same thing I told Gino just once, and then you're going to make a choice. She stepped away from the counter. She did not reach for the knife. She did not need to. And that was the whole point. No more protection money, not from me, not from Delgado, not from anyone on this street. This block is closed to you. And if you send one more man through that door with his hand out, I stop being the woman who cleans up messes. I go back to being my father's daughter. And you will spend the rest of what is going to be a very short career, wondering how a man like you disappeared without a single trace. Vincent Moretti looked at her for a long, long time, and then he did the last thing she expected. He smiled. It was not the smile Gino had used, the frightened one. It was not a boss's smile, cold and empty. It was something else. It was the smile of a man who had walked into a room expecting to be bored and had instead found, for the first time in 19 exhausting days, someone he did not have to talk down to. "You know what my problem is, Harper Blake," he said. "Everyone around me lies. Every single one of them. They smile and they call me boss, and they'd sell me for a warm chair. I've been the head of this family for less than 3 weeks, and I already can't remember the last time somebody looked me in the eye and told me the truth." He shook his head slowly. "And then I come down here to lean on a butcher, and she's the most honest person I've met since I took the chair. That's a hell of a thing." "I'm not telling you the truth to be your friend," Harper said. "I'm telling you the truth so you leave." "I know," Vincent said. "That's why I believe it." He reached into his jacket, slowly watching her watch him do it, and he took out not a weapon, but a business card plain with a single number on it, and he set it on the counter between them. "I'm going to leave. You made your point, and you made it better than anyone's made a point to me in a long time. Nobody collects from this street anymore. You have my word, and my word is the only thing in this city that's actually worth something, whatever you've heard." "And what do you get out of that?" Harper asked. "Men like you don't give things away." "No," Vincent agreed. "We don't." He nodded at the card. "You're right about that. So here's what I want, and you can say no, and I'll leave anyway, and this is done. I have a traitor. Someone at my own table is talking to people who want me dead, and I can't trust one single person around me to help me find him, because it might be any of them, and it might be all of them." He looked at her. "But you just told me exactly who you are out loud with your door locked, knowing I could send both those men in here. You did the one thing nobody in my whole world will do. So I'm going to ask you something no boss has ever asked a butcher in the history of this city." Harper waited. "Help me find him," Vincent said, "and this street stays free. Forever. Not because you scared me, because you're the only person in Boston I think I can trust, and I met you 9 minutes ago." Harper looked at the card on the counter. She looked at the man who had put it there, and somewhere deep under 10 years of trying to be nothing but a butcher, the thing her father had buried in her turned over in its sleep and began slowly to wake up. "I told you," she said quietly. "I go back to being his daughter. I don't do it halfway." "I'm counting on that," Vincent said. He turned and walked to the door, unlocked it himself, and stepped out into the street where his men were waiting. And he did not look back, because he had learned young that looking back tells people how much you want a thing, and he wanted this more than was safe. Harper Blake stood alone in her father's shop, the cards still on the counter. Her heart still beating, that same slow, terrible, steady beat that had never once quickened. Not when the blade came out, not when the boss came in, not when he asked her to become again the one thing she had sworn on her mother's grave she would never be. She picked up the card. She did not throw it away. She kept the card in her apron pocket for 3 days before she called the number, and in those 3 days she almost threw it away 11 times, and she counted every one. The first time was that same night, standing over the trash bin in the back office with the card between 2 fingers. She told herself she was insane. She told herself that whatever Vincent Moretti was, charming or dangerous or both, he was still the man whose family had bled this neighborhood dry, and no smile changed that. She held the card over the bin, and then she thought about Delgado's wet eyes and the promise she had made him, and she put the card back in her pocket. Because the truth was that saying yes to Vincent was the only way to make that promise real. A dead boss's word meant nothing. A living boss who owed her meant everything. She called him on the 4th morning before the shop opened, standing in the dark with the case lights off. He picked up on the 2nd ring. "I wondered if you would." "Don't," Harper said. "Don't sound pleased. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this because you're the only lever I have, and I intend to use you until this street is safe for good." "That's the most romantic thing anyone said to me in years," Vincent said, and she could hear that he was smiling, and then she hated that she could picture it. "How many people are at your table?" she asked, ignoring him. 9, not counting me. "And you suspect all 9. "I suspect 8, Vincent said. "I trust one, my cousin Danny. He came up with me. He took a bullet for me 2 years ago that was meant for my head. A pause. The other 8, any of them could be selling me to the Irish. I don't know which. That's the problem. No, Harper said. That's not the problem. The problem is you just told me the one man you trust completely, and you told me why, and you said it like it's a fact carved in stone. In my experience, the man who takes the bullet is the most dangerous man in the room, because after that, nobody ever looks at him twice. The line was silent for a long moment. You think Danny, Vincent started. I think nothing yet, Harper said. I've been awake 9 minutes. I'm telling you how to look. You've been surrounded by liars so long you've built one little island of trust and you're standing on it with both feet, and if it goes, you go with it. So the first thing we do is we stop assuming the island is solid. She could hear him breathing. Set a meeting, all 9 of them, somewhere I can watch without being seen. I don't need to hear what they say. I need to watch their hands and their eyes when your name comes up. People lie with their mouths. They can't lie with their weight. You can tell all that from watching. My father could tell if a man was going to run before the man knew it himself, Harper said. He taught me it's the most useful thing I own, when and where. Tomorrow night, the restaurant, Amico's on Hanover. It beat. How do I explain you being there? You don't, Harper said. I'll be a woman doing prep in your kitchen. Nobody at that table looks twice at kitchen staff. That's the whole point of kitchen staff. She hung up before he could answer because she did not want to give him the satisfaction of a goodbye, and because her own heart, that slow, steady thing that never raced, had done something strange when he said her name, and she needed it to stop. The next night at 7:40, Harper Blake stood at a steel prep table in the back of a restaurant that belonged to the Moretti family, wearing a borrowed white coat, her hair tied back, breaking down a case of chickens. She did not need to break down positioned, so that through the pass, she could see the entire private dining room without a single man in it ever seen her. They came in one at a time. She watched. The first was a heavy older man with a gray mustache who moved like his knees hurt and sat closest to the head of the table, which told her he thought he deserved to. That was Sal. She knew his type before Vincent ever said a name. He smiled at everyone and touched no one, and when he laughed, his eyes stayed flat and working. She marked him. Not guilty, marked. The second and third came together, a younger muscle, the kind who watched the door instead of the room, and she dismissed them almost at once. Foot soldiers did not sell out bosses. They did not know enough to be worth buying. Then came a lean man in his 40s with a quick, friendly face and hands that never stopped moving, adjusting his cuffs, his water glass, the salt. That was the kind of restless that meant either too much coffee or too much fear, and she filed him and kept watching. And then Danny came in, and Harper understood immediately why Vincent trusted him, and immediately did not trust him at all. Danny was warmth. Danny lit up the room. He clapped Sal on the shoulder, and the old man actually softened. He pulled out a chair for the restless man. He had a joke for the muscle by the door. And when Vincent finally walked in, Danny stood, and the whole table stood a half second later, because Danny had shown them it was time. That was not a bodyguard. That was a man who moved a room. And Harper's father had taught her that the most dangerous person at any table is never the one at the head of it. It is the one who decides when everyone else stands up. 8:15. Vincent took his seat. The dinner began, and Harper watched and cut chickens she would throw away and built her case in silence. She watched how each man reacted when Vincent spoke. Sal listened with his head tilted down and his eyes up, a man measuring. The restless one nodded too much, laughed too fast, agreed, before Vincent finished sentences. And that was fear. Plain fear, the fear of a man who owed money or had made a mistake, but not the cold stillness of a traitor. Danny listened like he already knew what Vincent was going to say. And once, just once, when Vincent turned to speak to Sal, Danny's eyes went to a man at the far end of the table. Harper had barely clocked a quiet, well-dressed man who had said almost nothing all night, and the two of them held a look for exactly 1 second too long and then let it go. Harper set down her knife. She had him, or she had them. The quiet man at the end was named, she would learn later, Aldo, and he handled the money, the family's money, the accounts, the movement of it, and a man who handled money and shares a private look with the man everyone trusts is not a coincidence. It is a partnership. And she had watched it happen in one unguarded second across a crowded room while carving a bird. But she said nothing that night. Her father had taught her that too. You do not act on the first thing you see. You watch it a second time and a third, because a look can mean 100 things, and a life is a heavy thing to spend on a guess. At the end of the night, when the men had gone, Vincent came into the kitchen. He found her washing her hands at the deep sink, the white coat already off folded on the table. Well, he said. Sit down, Harper told him. That's twice you've told me to sit down. And that's twice you're going to stand. Instead, I know. She dried her hands. Your money man, the quiet one. Aldo. Vincent's face went still. Aldo's been with my uncle for 20 years. I don't care if he was there when they crossed the water, Harper said. He and Danny share a look tonight that I didn't like. When your back was turned, 1 second, then they broke it off like they'd practiced breaking it off. That's not two men who happen to be in the same room. That's two men keeping a secret in the same room. Danny, Vincent said the name flatly. You're back on Danny. I'm telling you what I saw. You saw a look. I saw a conversation that didn't use words, Harper said. Between the man you trust the most and the man who touches all your money. And I'm telling you, Vincent, I don't know yet which one of them is the traitor or if it's both, but I know they are connected and I know they don't want you to know it. That's where you dig. Vincent turned away from her, ran a hand over his jaw, and for the first time since she had met him, he looked not like a Martian, but like a man who was tired and 36 and had been handed a burning house 19 days ago and told to save everyone inside it. You don't understand what you're asking me to believe, he said quietly. Danny is the only person on this earth I don't have to watch. Do you have any idea what that's worth? In my life, one person, one, and you want to take him from me on the strength of a look across a dinner table. I don't want to take anyone from you, Harper said, and her voice was gentler than she meant it to be, gentle enough that it surprised them both. I want you to live. That's the job you gave me. And the man who takes a bullet for you is exactly the man an enemy would build, because who's going to suspect him? You said it yourself. Nobody looks at Danny twice, including you, especially you. He didn't answer. Watch them, Harper said. That's all. Don't confront anyone. Don't change how you act. Just watch the way I watched tonight and see if I'm wrong. I would love to be wrong, Vincent. I'd love for it to be Sal, who clearly wants your chair, and would be so much simpler. She picked up her bag. But I don't think it's going to be simple. It never is with the ones who smile at you. She left him standing in the kitchen, and she did not look back either, and it was only on the drive home that she realized they had both learned the same trick, the two of them, the not looking back, and that the fact she had noticed his meant she was already paying more attention to Vincent Moretti than to the case, and that was a mistake she could not afford. The confirmation came 4 days later, and it came the way these things always do, sideways, when nobody was looking for it. Harper was closing up at the shop on a Thursday night, 9 o'clock, the street outside empty, when a car she recognized pulled up out front. Not Vincent's. She had learned Vincent's cars, all three of them, the way you learn the footsteps of someone you are trying not to think about. This was a different car, and the man who got out of it was Danny. He came to the door and knocked, though the sign said closed, and smiled at her through the glass, that warm room moving smile, and Harper felt the whole night sharpened to a point. She unlocked the door. Miss Blake, Danny said. I hope it's all right. Vincent talks about you. He stepped inside without being asked, easy, comfortable, a man used to being welcome everywhere. The butcher who scared the boss. You're a legend already, you know, that whole family's talking about you. I doubt Vincent told the whole family anything, Harper said. She did not step back from him. She never stepped back. What can I do for you, Danny? He noticed that she knew his name and something flickered, and then the smile came back wider to cover it. He tell you about me. He tells me a lot of things, Harper said, which was true and which she let sit there like bait. Danny walked a slow circle around the front of the shop, looking at the case, the hooks, the tools, the way a man appraises a place he intends to remember. It's a nice shop, he said. Real nice. Your dad's right. Vincent said your dad was a butcher. He turned. Just a butcher. And there it was. Harper kept her face perfectly still, but inside everything went cold and clear, and certain, because that question, just a butcher, was a question that only made sense if someone had already wondered whether her father was more, and the only person she had told the truth to was Vincent, alone behind a locked door, and Vincent trusted exactly one man on this earth. Danny knew, which meant Vincent had told him, which meant that everything Harper had said to Vincent about Aldo, about the look, about digging, Vincent had almost certainly repeated to the one man he could not stop trusting. She had told Vincent to watch Danny, and Vincent had gone straight to Danny and told him he was being watched. She could have killed him for it. Vincent, not Danny. For being so lonely that he handed his one weakness the exact knife she'd forged to use on him. Just a butcher, Harper said evenly. Same as me. Why do you ask? No reason. Danny smiled. Curiosity. It's my worst habit. He drifted toward the back of the shop, toward the office, and Harper moved with him, unhurried, keeping herself between him and the desk, where the oilcloth bundle sat in the bottom drawer that stuck. You mind, I've never seen how a place like this works in back. I do mind, actually, Harper said. It's 9 o'clock and I want to go home. Course. He stopped. He looked at her, and for just a moment the warmth drained all the way out of his face, and she saw what was underneath it, and it was patient, and it was cold, and it was exactly what she had seen in the 1-second look across the dinner table. You be careful out here, Miss Blake. South Boston. Woman alone. Shop full of sharp things. All kinds of accidents happen to people who get involved in things that aren't their business. Is that a threat, Danny? It's a curiosity, Danny said, moving to the door. My worst habit. Good night. He left. The bell rang, and Harper stood alone in the shop with her heart doing its slow, terrible, steady beat, and she understood two things with total clarity. The first was that Danny was the traitor, or half of it, and he had just come to look her in the eye and measure whether she was a problem the same way Vincent had, except Vincent had walked out curious, and Danny had walked out having decided. The second was that she was now officially a person that a man like Danny had decided about. And people that men like Danny decided about did not tend to open the shop the next morning. She called Vincent. You told him, she said the second he picked up. No hello. You told Danny what I said about watching him, didn't you? A pause that lasted a year. I told him you had a theory about a leak, Vincent said carefully. I didn't say his name. You didn't have to say his name, Vincent, my God. Harper closed her eyes. He was just here, in my shop, at 9 o'clock at night, asking me if my father was just a butcher. There is exactly one way he knows to ask that question, and it's you. You went to the one man you can't see clearly, and you told him someone's onto him, and now he's onto me, and he just stood in my father's shop and told me accidents happen to women who get involved in things. He came to your shop. Vincent's voice had changed completely. All the warmth, all the ease gone, replaced by something low and dangerous. Danny came to your shop. Yes. And threatened you. He was very polite about it, Harper said. That's how I know he meant it. Vincent was silent, and in that silence, Harper could hear a man's whole world quietly coming apart. The last island of trust he had been standing on, cracking down the middle, and part of her, the part that had held an old man's hand and promised him safety, was glad, because now Vincent would finally see. And another part of her, a part she did not want to look at directly, ached for him because she knew exactly what it cost to lose the one person you thought you didn't have to watch. She had lost her father. She knew. I'm coming over, Vincent said. No, Harper said. That's the worst thing you could do. If he's watching me, and he is, then you showing up at my shop at night confirms everything he suspects and gets us both killed faster. Go home. Act normal. Trust nobody, and I mean nobody, not Sal, not Aldo, and God help you, not Danny, especially not Danny, no matter what your gut tells you. Your gut is the thing he's been using against you this whole time. That's what makes him good. He took a bullet for me. I know, Harper said softer now. I know he did, and I've been thinking about that, and I want you to think about it too when you can stand to. Where were you when it happened? Who set up the meeting where you got shot at? Was it Danny? Silence. Wasn't it? The silence stretched so long she thought the call had dropped. He set it up, Vincent said finally, and his voice was hollow. He set up the meeting. He got shot pushing me down. It was in the shoulder. He was in the hospital 2 days. A long breath. You think he took a bullet on purpose? To buy my trust for 2 years. I think, Harper said, choosing each word the way her father had taught her to choose the first cut, that a shoulder heals and a boss's trust doesn't. And a man who understood that trade made it a long time ago, and has been collecting on it ever since. I think Danny is the most patient enemy you've ever had, and I think he's been at your right hand the whole time, and I think the only reason you're still alive is that whatever he's building isn't finished yet. Vincent didn't argue. That was the worst part. The boss who had smiled at her in the shop, who had matched her word for word, didn't argue at all. He just breathed on the other end of the line like a man who has been shown the floor of his own house has been rotten the entire time he'd been dancing on it. "What do I do?" he said. And it was not a boss asking. It was a man. "Nothing tonight," Harper said. "You do nothing tonight. You go home, you pour yourself a drink, you sit with it, and tomorrow when you can look at him without your face showing it, we start building the thing that ends it. Not a fight, not yet, proof. Because if you move on, Danny, without proof, half your table sides with him, and you're the paranoid new boss who killed the man who took a bullet for you. And then Sal has everything he needs to bear you. You understand? We do this right or we don't do it at all." "You keep saying we." Harper stopped. She hadn't noticed she'd been doing it, but she had. Somewhere in the last 20 minutes, watching Danny circle her father's shop like a wolf, it had stopped being Vincent's problem as she was solving and become theirs, and she could not for the life of her say when the line had moved. "I'm the only one you can trust," she said finally, which was true and which was also not the whole reason, and they both knew it. "So yes, we get some sleep, Vincent." She hung up, and she stood in the dark shop a long time, and then she went to the back to the desk, and she opened the bottom drawer that stuck, and this time she took the oilcloth bundle out, and she unwrapped it, and she picked it up. Her father's knife fit her hand like it had been waiting. "All right, Dad," she said quietly to the empty room, to the man who had cried once and taught her anyway. "You win. Here we go." She did not sleep that night. She sat in the front of the shop with the lights off and the knife on the table beside her and watched the street, and twice a car slowed as it passed, and twice she memorized it, and by morning she had a list of who was watching her and from where, and she had not been afraid one single minute, and that more than anything was a thing that would have broken her father's heart if he had lived to see it. The next morning, Vincent did exactly what she told him. He went about his day. He met with Sal about the docks. He had lunch with 2 councilmen the family owned. And at 3 o'clock, he sat down with Danny alone, the way they had 100 times, and he smiled, and he asked about Danny's kids, and he did not let one flicker of what he now knew reach his face. And afterward, he called Harper and told her he had never worked so hard at anything in his life as he had worked at that one lunch. "How did I do?" he asked. "I don't know," Harper said. "Did he offer to do you any favors? Did he try to get closer?" Guilty men who think they have been spotted always do one of 2 things. They pull away or they lean in hard to test whether you still trust them. A pause. He asked if he could handle the meeting with the Irish next week. Said, "I've got too much on my plate," said he'd take it off my hands. Harper closed her eyes. "There it is." "There what is?" "The meeting with the Irish," Harper said. "The people paying him. He wants to run it himself without you in the room so he can set the table for whatever comes next. He's leaning in, Vincent. He's testing you. And if you say yes, you hand him the exact meeting he needs to sell you at. And if you say no, he knows you don't trust him anymore. And then the clock starts and he moves first." She opened her eyes. "This is it. This is the whole thing right here. What you say to him about that meeting decides everything. So what do I say?" And Harper Blake, standing behind the counter of her dead father's butcher shop, with his knife in the drawer and a Mafia boss on the phone asking her how to survive, understood that she had crossed a line so far back, she couldn't see it anymore, that she was no longer a woman who wanted to be left alone, that she had become without deciding to exactly what her father had made her. "You say yes," she said. "What?" "You let him have the meeting," Harper said. "You smile, you thank him, you tell him you don't know what you'd do without him. You give him everything he wants." Her hand found the edge of the counter. "Because a man who thinks he's won stops being careful. And when Danny walks into that room to sell you Vincent, he's not going to know that we set the table first. He thinks he's the smartest man at your right hand." Her voice went very quiet and very certain, and very much her father's. "He's about to find out he's been sitting next to something worse." The line was silent. "Who are you?" Vincent said. Not a question, something closer to wonder. "I told you the first day," Harper said. "I'm the one holding the knife. You just didn't believe me yet." And on the other end of the line, in a house full of people he could no longer trust, Vincent Moretti smiled, and for the first time in 19 days, then 20, then 23, he did not feel alone. Neither of them said goodbye. They had both learned that trick, but neither of them hung up right away either, and for a few seconds the line just held open between the boss and the butcher. Two people who had both spent their whole lives being underestimated, listening to each other, breathe in the dark, while somewhere across the city, a smiling man named Danny made a phone call to people who spoke with an accent from across the water and told them the meeting was set, and that the new boss suspected nothing, and that soon Boston would have a vacancy at the top. He had no idea he'd already been counted, measured, and marked by a woman he'd called an accident waiting to happen, standing in a shop full of the sharpest things in the city, sharpening one more. The meeting with the Irish was set for the following Tuesday at 10 at night, and Harper spent the 6 days before it doing the one thing her father had told her mattered more than any blade, which was learning the room before anyone else knew there was a room to learn. She started with the money. "I need to see Aldo's books," she told Vincent on the phone Friday morning. "Not the real ones, the ones he shows you. A man who's stealing keeps 2 sets, and the difference between them is a confession." "I can't just ask Aldo for the books," Vincent said. "He'll know something's wrong." "You don't ask Aldo," Harper said. "You ask Aldo to prepare a summary for the Irish meeting. Tell him you want to walk in knowing every number cold so nobody can play you. That's a reasonable thing for a boss to want. He can't say no to it without looking like he's hiding something. And if he is hiding something, watching him try to build a clean summary out of dirty books is going to cost him 3 nights of sleep." She paused. "And I want to be there when he hands it to you." Kitchen again. Same as before. "You think Aldo's in it with Danny?" "I think Aldo shared a look with Danny that neither of them wanted me to see," Harper said. "I think Danny is the knife and Aldo is the hand that pays for the knife. But I don't guess Vincent. I told you, I watch it twice. So set it up." He set it up. Monday night, one day before the Irish, Aldo came to Amico's with a leather folder under his arm, and Harper stood at the same steel prep table in the same borrowed white coat, breaking down the same chickens she would throw away, watching through the same pass. Aldo was nervous. Not the restless, cuff-adjusting, nervous of the other man from the first dinner. This was deeper. This was a man who had not slept, whose hands shook just slightly when he opened the folder, who kept glancing at the door as if expecting someone. He walked Vincent through the numbers in a low voice, and Vincent nodded and asked exactly the questions Harper had drilled into him over 3 phone calls. And every time Vincent asked a hard one, Aldo's eyes went to the door again. He wasn't afraid of Vincent. He was afraid of who else might walk in. Harper set down her knife. She understood suddenly that she'd had it half wrong. Aldo wasn't Danny's partner. Aldo was Danny's prisoner. The look across the dinner table hadn't been 2 conspirators sharing a secret. It had been a frightened man checking with the man who owned him. Danny had something on Aldo, or over Aldo, and was using the money man to move the family's cash without Vincent ever seeing it leave, which meant Aldo could be turned. When Aldo finally left at 11, Harper didn't wait for Vincent to come into the kitchen. She took off the white coat, walked out the back, and got to her own car in time to see Aldo sitting in his park down the block, not driving, just sitting with both hands on the wheel and his head down like a man praying or breaking. She got out. She walked to his window. She knocked on the glass. Aldo nearly came out of his skin. He rolled the window down 2 inches. "Who are you, Bicon?" "I'm the kitchen," Harper said. "The one nobody looks at twice." She leaned down so he could see her face. "You handed Vincent a folder full of lies tonight, Aldo, and you're sitting here about to be sick over it, and I think that's because you're not a bad man. I think you're a scared one. There's a difference, and I can tell the difference, and I don't have long, so roll the window down." He stared at her. His mouth opened and closed. "He has your daughter's address," Aldo whispered. "Danny, he has her school, her schedule. He showed me a photograph of her at the bus stop." His voice broke. "What was I supposed to do? He's moving money to the Irish through accounts I built. If I stop, he hurts her. If Vincent finds out, Vincent kills me. There's no door out of this room. There's no door." "There's always a door," Harper said. "You just came in too scared to find it. My father told me that once. Well, he told it to me the other way around, but the point stands." She crouched by the window so they were eye to eye. "Listen to me, and I'm going to get your daughter somewhere Danny can't reach tonight before the meeting. And in exchange, you're going to do exactly what I say tomorrow. You're going to walk into that room and you're going to do everything Danny expects, right up until the moment I tell you not to. Can you do that? Why would you help me? Aldo said. You don't know me. Because a frightened man who protects his kid isn't my enemy, Harper said. My enemy is the man who made you choose. Now give me her address. That was how Harper Blake spent the night before the most dangerous meeting of her life, driving to a quiet street on the other side of the river, waking a terrified 19-year-old girl and her mother and moving them to a motel 2 towns over under a name that wasn't theirs, all without telling Vincent she was doing it because she had learned something the hard way already in this, which was that anything she told Vincent might carry straight to the wolf at his side. She called him at 2 in the morning when it was done. Aldo's turn, she said. He was never Danny's partner. Danny had his kid. I moved the kid. Aldo's ours now, and he'll do what we need tomorrow. There was a long silence on the line. You did all that tonight, Vincent said. By yourself, and you're just telling me now. Yes. Why now and not before? Because if I'd told you before, you might have felt something on your face at that lunch with Danny, Harper said, and I wasn't going to bet a 19-year-old girl's life on your poker face. No offense. Vincent laughed low and disbelieving. None taken. A pause. You know, when I walked into your shop, I thought I was going to have to teach you how dangerous my world is. I know, Harper said. I'm starting to think you should be teaching me. I am teaching you, Harper said. You're just an expensive student. Get some sleep, Vincent. Tomorrow we take your family back. Tuesday, the day of the meeting. The clock started running the moment Harper woke, and it did not stop. She opened the shop as normal because a woman who suddenly closed her shop was a woman announcing she was up to something, and she served her morning regulars, and Mrs. Okafor came in and looked at her long and hard and said, You've got that look my late husband got the day before he did something stupid and brave. It's just a Tuesday, Harper said. It's never just a Tuesday when a woman looks like that, Mrs. Okafor said, and she squeezed Harper's arm at the door the way she always did, and this time she held on an extra second. Come back from wherever you're going, honey. This street needs its butcher. Harper didn't answer that. She couldn't. She just watched the old woman go, and then she closed the shop early at 4, and she went to the back, and she took her father's knife out of the drawer and slid it into the sheath he'd made for it, the one that sat flat against the small of her back under a jacket invisible. And she stood a moment with her hand on the desk where he used to sit. Last thing she said to him, I keep saying that, but this one I mean it. We finish this, and then it goes back in the drawer, and I go back to being nothing but yours. She wasn't sure she believed it, even as she said it. Some part of her had woken all the way up now, and it liked being awake, and that frightened her more than Danny ever could. The plan was simple because her father had taught her that complicated plans were how amateurs got themselves killed. Vincent would go to the meeting and, as agreed, letting Danny run it. The Irish would come expecting a boss they could manipulate through Danny and a money man they'd already bought through fear. What none of them knew was that Aldo would be wearing a recorder, that every word Danny spoke selling out his boss would be captured, and that Harper would be positioned close enough to move if it went wrong, because it always went wrong, and a plan that didn't account for going wrong wasn't a plan. It was a wish. 9:40 at night. Harper was in position in the dark near the loading dock of the warehouse where the meeting would happen, close enough to hear a raised voice, close enough to reach the door in under 10 seconds, which she had timed twice. She had her father's knife at the small of her back and her phone in her hand and Aldo's voice in her ear through the little receiver he didn't know she could hear him on. 9:50. The cars came. She counted them. 3 for the Irish, 2 for the Moretti side, and she watched the men get out, and she felt her heart do its slow, terrible, steady thing, and she waited. 9:55. They went inside. 10 o'clock. It began. For 20 minutes, it went exactly the way she told Vincent it would. She could hear it through Aldo's wire, muffled the sounds of men being cordial, the clink of glasses. Danny's warm voice running the room, the way he ran every room easy, funny in control. Vincent said little, which was the hardest thing she'd asked of him, to sit in a room and let another man play at being him and not react. The Irish laid out their terms. Danny agreed to things a loyal man would never agree to. Territory percentages access, and every word of it went onto the recorder against Aldo's chest. And then at 10:22 it went wrong. There's a wire in this room, said a voice she didn't know, an Irish voice, flat and certain. I can smell it. My man says somebody in here's transmitting. The room went silent. In her ear, Harper heard Aldo's breathing change, go fast and shallow, and she pressed the receiver harder against her ear and willed him silently, do not move, do not touch it, do not look down. Hold, hold, hold. Nobody's wired, Danny said easily. These are my people. I vouch for every man in this room. Then you won't mind us checking your men, the Irish voice said. And Harper heard chairs scraping, and she heard Aldo's breathing turn into something close to a sob. And she knew with total clarity that she had about 90 seconds before a frightened father with a recorder taped to his chest got patted down by professionals in a room full of guns, and she had a choice to make, and she made it the way her father had taught her, instantly and completely, with no part of her held back. She moved, not toward the door, toward the fuse box she'd found on her first walk of the building 3 days ago, because her father had also taught her that the first thing you learn about any room is how to make it go dark. 10:23 and 40 seconds. The warehouse went black. In the dark, she heard shouting, the particular chaos of armed men who suddenly can't see the things she'd been counting on, and she was already moving through the loading dock door she'd propped that afternoon into the black, into a room she had memorized in the light so she could own it in the dark, which not one other person in that building could do. Aldo, she said low into the dark, moving toward where his breathing was. Aldo, it's the kitchen. Take my hand. A shaking hand found hers. The recorder, she whispered. Give it to me. Now. He fumbled it off his chest and pressed it into her palm, and she put it in her jacket, and then she pushed him low toward the wall, away from the center of the room where the guns were. Stay down. Stay against the wall. Move toward the light when it comes on, and act as scared as you actually are, which won't be hard. You did it. You're done. Go. And then Harper Blake did the thing that no one in that room could have predicted, the thing that changed everything, because as she turned to get herself back out through the loading dock, a hand closed around her arm in the dark. A big hand, a strong one, a hand that had grabbed a lot of arms in a lot of dark rooms and always won. Who the hell are you? Danny's voice said against her ear, low and cold. All the warmth gone, the real Danny, the one she'd seen for 1 second across a dinner table. He couldn't see her face, but he'd felt her move through the dark with purpose, and he was not a stupid man either. You're not one of ours. And Harper, who had spent 10 years being the woman men grabbed by the arm because they thought she was soft, turned into him the exact way she'd turned into Gino in her father's shop. Except this time there was no display case to protect, no business to run, no reason on earth to be gentle. You had a little girl watched at a bus stop, Harper said quietly into the dark, folding his wrist backward against the joint until she felt the tendon scream. Her name is not your business. She's somewhere you'll never find her. And you're about to learn what my father learned a long time ago, which is that the dark belongs to the person who isn't afraid of it. Danny grunted. Twisted brought his other hand around with a blade in it. She felt the air move, and she was already not where the blade was, because in the dark he was fighting blind, and she was fighting from memory, and memory always wins. She took the blade off him. She didn't even have to hurt him much to do it. She just knew exactly where his hand had to be to hold the knife, and she took the knife from that place. And then his own blade was against his throat, and her mouth was against his ear. Don't, she breathed. I know exactly how deep. I've known since I was 12. Give me one reason and I'll show you, and I promise you no one will ever find enough to bury. Danny went still. For the first time in his patient, smiling 2-year game, Danny went completely still. Lights, someone shouted, and Harper heard the fuse box being found, heard the click, and she had maybe 2 seconds before the room came back, and she made her second instant decision, which was that she could not be seen, not here, not yet, because a woman who could be identified was a woman with a target on her back and an old man named Delgado who paid for it. So she did the last thing Danny expected. She let him go, shoved him hard toward the center of the room, and melted backward through the loading dock door into the deeper dark of the alley. And when the lights came up 2 seconds later, Danny was standing alone in the middle of the floor, holding his own knife, disarmed, disoriented, with no woman anywhere in sight, and everyone in that room looking at him. There, Danny said, spinning, pointing at nothing. There was someone, a woman. She was here. There's nobody here, Danny, the Irish voice said slowly. There's just you, standing in the middle of the room with your knife out. In the dark you swore was full of your loyal men. A long, dangerous pause. You want to explain to me why the lights went out the second I asked to search your people. And Harper pressed against the outside wall of the warehouse, breathing that slow, steady breath, listened through Aldo's wire, which was now in her own pocket, recording everything as the trap she had built. Without anyone knowing it, snapped shut on Danny from a direction he never saw coming. Because she hadn't just protected Aldo. She had made Danny look to the Irish, who were paying him like a man who'd brought a spy into a sealed room and then killed the lights to help her escape. She had made the traitor look like he was betraying the people he was betraying his boss for. The most patient enemy Vincent had ever had was now trusted by no one on either side of the war, and he didn't even know why. I swear to you, Danny was saying, and for the first time his warm, room-moving voice had a crack in it, a real one. I swear I don't know who that was. I would never. Sit down, Danny, the Irish voice said. We're going to have a longer conversation than we planned. 10:31 at night. Harper Blake walked away from the warehouse in the dark, her father's knife still sheathed and unused at the small of her back, Danny's blade in one pocket, and a recording that could end a war in the other. And she called Vincent's phone, and it rang once, twice, and she felt something cold move through her when he didn't pick up on the third ring the way he always did. And then his voice came low and tight. I can't talk, Vincent breathed. I'm still in the room. They think I'm as confused as they are. Where are you? What did you do? The lights the woman Danny's screaming about that was. That was me, Harper said. Aldo's safe. His kid's safe. I have the whole meeting on tape, every word Danny said selling you out, and I made him look like he brought a spy and helped her run. The Irish don't trust him anymore. Neither should anyone at your table by tomorrow once the story spreads. She got into her car. It's not over. He's alive, and cornered animals are the dangerous kind, and now he knows there's a ghost in the dark who took his knife and knew about the little girl. But we won tonight, Vincent. You just have to get out of that room alive. How do I do that? The same way you've done everything else since I met you, Harper said. You keep your face still, and you let them think you are the least dangerous person in the room, and you walk out the door like you've got nothing to hide. And then you come to my shop, and I'll have coffee on, and we finish planning how to end him for good. A pause. Harper, Vincent said, and his voice had changed, gone quiet, gone into a register as she hadn't heard from him yet. You went into a warehouse full of armed men, in the dark, for a money man you met yesterday and a kid you never met. And you didn't tell me because you didn't fully trust me, and you were right not to. Vincent. I've had people around me my whole life who die for me because they're paid to, he said. I never once had somebody do something dangerous for me because it was right. I didn't know what that looked like until tonight. A breath. I don't know what to do with it. Harper sat in her car in the dark, the engine off her heart, doing its slow, steady thing, and for once in her life, she did not have a fast answer ready. Get out of the room alive, she said, finally softer than she meant to. That's what you do with it. You survive the night, and then we'll figure out the rest. She hung up. She sat there a moment longer, and then she started the car and drove back towards South Boston, toward her father's shop, toward the only life she'd ever wanted, and the new one that was pulling her out of it. One dark warehouse at a time, and she did not let herself think too hard about the fact that she was driving home to make coffee for a Mafia boss, or about the way her chest had gone tight when he didn't answer on the third ring. Because those were problems for a woman with time to spare, and she had a traitor to bury first. Behind her in a warehouse she'd turned dark and then walked out of. Danny sat in a chair surrounded by men who no longer believed a word he said, running his thumb over the empty place on his belt where his knife used to be, trying to understand how a night he had planned for 2 years had come apart in 90 seconds in the dark at the hands of someone he never saw, who knew things she could not possibly know, who had breathed a threat against his ear, so calm and so certain that he, who had frightened men his whole life, had for the first time felt the specific cold of being the one who was outmatched. He didn't know her name, he didn't know her face, but he knew one thing now, the way you know a change in the weather, and it kept him awake long after the Irish let him go. Someone had entered his war, and whoever she wasn't afraid of the dark, and she wasn't afraid of him, and men who weren't afraid of Danny didn't exist until suddenly, impossibly, one did. Vincent got out of the room alive, and he came to her shop at 1 a.m, and Harper had the coffee on, exactly like she'd said. He came in through the back the way she'd told him to, and when he stepped into the office where she sat with 2 cups on the desk and her father's knife lying beside them unwrapped, He stopped in the doorway and just looked at her for a long moment, and she looked back, and neither of them said anything, because there wasn't a word yet for what the night had made them. "You look terrible," Harper said finally. "I feel worse." He sat down heavily across the desk from her, took the coffee, wrapped both hands around it, we did like a man trying to get warm. "I sat in that room for another 40 minutes after you called, smiling, nodding, watching Danny try to explain a ghost to men who'd already decided he was lying. And the whole time, all I could think was, she's out there in the dark by herself, and if this goes wrong, I'll never even know where they put her." "It didn't go wrong," Harper said. "It could have. Everything could have. That's not a reason to do nothing." She slid one of the cups closer to him, even though he already had one, a small, unnecessary thing, and she wasn't sure why she did it. "Drink. You've got maybe 6 hours before the story of tonight finishes going around, and then everything changes and I need you sharp." Vincent drank, and for a few minutes they just sat there, the boss and the butcher in the small office where her father used to do the books 2 in the morning, and it was the first quiet either of them had felt in weeks. Then Vincent said, "Play it for me." Harper took out the recorder. She set it on the desk between them, and she pressed play, and Danny's voice filled the little room warm and easy and utterly damning, agreeing to hand the Moretti family's territory to the Irish, piece by piece promising them Vincent would be dealt with before the season changed, laughing about how the new boss trusted him like a brother, how he'd spent 2 years and 1 bullet buying that trust, and it had been worth every second. Harper watched Vincent's face while it played. She'd expected rage. She got something worse. She watched a man listen to proof that the one person he'd allowed himself to love in a loveless world had been playing him the entire time, and she watched him not explode, just go very still, the stillness she now recognized as the most dangerous thing he did. And when it was over, he reached out and stopped the recording himself gently with one finger. 2 years, he said quietly. "Vincent." "He held my newborn son," Vincent said. "Danny, he's my kid's godfather. He stood in a church and he swore." His jaw worked. "And the bullet was real, Harper. It went into him. He bled. You don't fake that. What kind of a man takes a real bullet to sell a lie for 2 years?" "A patient one," Harper said softly. "The most dangerous kind. I told you that the first night." "You did." He looked up at her and his eyes were wet, and he was furious that she could see him fighting it. "I keep thinking about my uncle. In prison, he named me over Sal, over everyone, and I thought it was because he saw something in me. But maybe he just knew I was the easiest to get rid of. The young one, the one with a soft spot named Danny sitting right beside him." He set the coffee down. "Maybe the whole thing was built to fail from the day I took the chair." And here was the moment Harper understood where a lesser man broke, where the weight of it caved him in, and she had a choice about what to say, and she made it the way she made all her choices, fast and complete. "Stop," she said, not gently. "Stop it right now." Vincent looked up. "You want to sit in my father's chair and feel sorry for yourself? You can do it on your own time," Harper said. "Not tonight. Tonight a scared money man wore a wire for you because I asked him to. Tonight a 19-year-old girl's asleep in a motel under a fake name because she's safe now from your godfather and she doesn't even know your name. Tonight you walked out of a room you were supposed to die in. That didn't happen because the universe likes you, Vincent. It happened because people did hard things. So you don't get to sit there and decide you were always going to lose. You don't get to make their work mean nothing." She leaned forward. "My father used to say the dead have the luxury of despair. The living have work to do. You're still living. So work." Vincent stared at her, and then slowly something came back into his face, the thing she'd seen the first day in the shop, the sharpness, the boss underneath the man. "You're a hard woman, Harper Blake," he said. "I'm my father's daughter," she said. "You keep forgetting. Now, here's where we are." And she laid it out for him fast, the way you brief someone who has to move at dawn. Danny was alive, but exposed. The Irish no longer trusted him, but they were businessmen, and a businessman doesn't kill an asset he's spent money on until he's sure the asset is worthless. Which meant Danny had a small window, maybe a day, maybe 2, to prove himself useful again, and there was only one thing he could offer that would buy his life back with the Irish. "Me," Harper said. "The ghost in the dark. The woman who took his knife and knew about the girl. If Danny can find her, catch her, and hand her to the Irish, He's not a man who let a spy escape anymore. He's the man who caught her. He buys his life back, and he gets his revenge in the same move. Vincent's face changed. He doesn't know it's you. Not yet, Harper said. But he's not stupid. He came to my shop the week before asking if my father was just a butcher. He's going to sit in that motel or wherever he's hiding, and he's going to replay every strange thing that's happened since you took the chair, and he's going to land on the woman who scared Gino the butcher, who wasn't afraid, and he's going to wonder. And then he's going to come here, to be sure. She picked up her father's knife and turned it over in the light. So we're not going to wait for that. We're going to decide when and where, not him. You want to bait him, Vincent said slowly. With yourself. I want to end it, Harper said. On my ground, in my shop, where I know every inch and he knows nothing the same as the warehouse, but in reverse, because this time I'm not hiding in the dark. This time I want him to walk in the front door and see exactly who took his knife. Vincent was quiet for a moment. Then he said no. Vincent, no. He stood up. I've spent this whole thing letting you walk into rooms alone while I sat and smiled and kept my face still. Aldish wore the wire. You killed the lights. You took the knife. You moved the girl. And I sat at tables. I'm done sitting at tables, Harper. If Danny comes to your shop, I'm going to be here. That's exactly what he'll expect, Harper said. The boss and the ghost together. It's more dangerous, not less. I don't care. And there it was, the crack in him, the thing under the boss and under the man, the raw place her whole life had taught her to recognize because she had one just like it. I have watched everyone I trust turn out to be bought or with the enemy. Everyone. My whole life. And then you walked into it, a butcher from Southie who owes me nothing, and you did the bravest thing I've ever seen for people who can't pay you back. And I am not going to sit at another table while you face down the man who's coming to kill you. I won't. You can call me an amateur. You can tell me I'll get us both killed, but you cannot make me sit this one out. Not this one. The shop was very quiet. Harper looked at him. This man who had walked into her father's shop 3 weeks ago to break her, who had instead been the first person in 10 years to look at her hands before her body, and she felt the tight thing in her chest again, the thing she kept refusing to name, and she understood that she was not going to win this argument, and worse, that she didn't fully want to. You'll do exactly what I say, she said. The second we're in it. No hero moves. No stepping in front of me. If I tell you to get down, you get down before I finish the word. Danny is better than anyone you've ever fought, and the only edge we have is that I'm better than him, and that edge disappears the second I have to protect you instead of fight him. Do you understand? I understand. Say it back to me. If you tell me to get down, I get down. I don't step in front of you. I do what you say. He almost smiled. You're very bossy for someone who spent this whole time telling me she just wants to be left alone. I do just want to be left alone, Harper said. That's the tragedy of my whole life. Nobody lets me. She stood and picked up her father's knife and slid it into its sheath. Go home. Sleep if you can. Tell nobody, and I mean nobody, not Aldo, not your cousin's cousin, nobody. Come back tomorrow at dusk through the back, and we set the shop the way I want it, and then we wait and we see if he comes. And if he doesn't come tomorrow, then we wait the day after, Harper said. He'll come Vincent, a man who's been outmatched for the first time in his life, can't leave it alone. It eats him. I know because I've eaten men alive with exactly that sitting in the dark, letting them wonder. He's wondering right now. He'll come. He came the third night. 2 days of waiting. 2 days of Harper opening the shop as normal, serving her regulars, watching the street, memorizing which cars slowed, while Vincent came each evening at dusk and they arranged the shop the way she wanted it, moving the heavy steel table to the angle she liked, propping the office door so it swung the right way, learning to move through the front room in the dark until Vincent could do it almost half as well as she could, which she told him was not a compliment. Mrs. Okafor came in that second morning and stopped dead inside the door and looked at Harper for a long moment. He's here somewhere, isn't he? She said. The trouble, it's close now. You should do your shopping somewhere else this week, Mrs. Okafor, Harper said gently. Just this week. The old woman's eyes filled. You're going to do something stupid and brave. I'm going to do something necessary, Harper said. There's a difference. My father taught me the difference. Your father, Mrs. Okafor said, and shook her head, was a butcher who I now suspect was never only a butcher. And you are your father's daughter, and God help this whole city. She reached out and gripped Harper's arm one more time hard, the way she always did, and then she did something she'd never done. She pulled Harper down and kissed her forehead like a mother. Come back from it, Harper Blake. This street needs you, and I've buried enough brave people. She left, and Harper stood in the empty shop with the ghost of a kiss on her forehead and had to take a moment before she could breathe right again, because that of all things, that small, fierce love from an old woman was the thing that could still reach the place her father had armored over, and she couldn't afford to feel it tonight. The third night at 9:40, Vincent was in the back office in the dark, and Harper was in the front alone, visible through the glass, the case lights off, but the small light over the counter and standing where a woman closing up her shop would stand bait in plain sight when the car she'd been waiting for slowed on the street outside and did not pass. He's here, she said quietly, and in the back, she heard Vincent go still. Danny got out of the car alone. That was the first thing that was wrong, and she clocked it instantly because a smart man does not come to catch a ghost alone. Either he was more desperate than she thought, or he wasn't alone at all, and the others were already in position, and she didn't have time to know which before the bell over the door, the one her father hung the year she was born, rang, and Danny walked into Blake Prime Cuts wearing his warm room-moving smile. "Miss Blake," he said, "working late?" "Always," Harper said. "What can I do for you, Danny?" "Funny thing," Danny said, drifting into the shop the easy way he drifted into every room. Hands loose, smile wide, and she watched his weight, watched his hands, watched everything her father had taught her to watch. "Had a strange couple of nights, real strange. Somebody made a fool of me in front of some business partners. A woman, in the dark, took something of mine." His eyes flicked to the counter, to her hands and back. "Knew things about me she couldn't have known. Where my associates' families go to school, that kind of thing. Personal things." "Sounds like you've made an enemy," Harper said. "Sounds like I have." Danny stopped a careful distance away, and she noted the distance, noted that he'd learned from the warehouse that he wasn't going to come close and give her his wrist, and that told her he already knew. "And I got to thinking, who in this city isn't afraid of me? Who moves like they were trained, who's got a dead father everybody says was just a butcher?" The smile stayed, but his eyes had gone to that patient cold place. "And I kept coming back to the fat girl in Southie who put Gino on the floor. The one Vincent won't shut up about. So I thought I'd come ask you, woman to man, was it you in the dark?" And Harper Blake, standing in her father's shop, made a choice. The biggest one of the whole thing, because she could lie. She could play the frightened butcher one more time and maybe buy an hour. Or she could do the thing she'd promised herself she'd do, which was let him see exactly who had taken his knife. "Yes," she said. The word landed in the shop like a dropped blade. "It was me," Harper said, "in the dark. I took your knife. I moved the girl. She's somewhere. You'll never find her. And her father wore a wire that has your voice on it, selling out a man who made you his son's godfather. That was all me, Danny, the fat girl from Southie. So now you know. The question is what you think you're going to do about it alone in my shop, which I know every inch of, and you don't know it all." For 1 second, one full second, Danny's smile fell all the way off his face, and she saw the real man, the one who'd spent 2 years in a bullet on patients, and he was not warm at all. He was a cold and frightened animal that had just realized the ground it was standing on belonged to something more dangerous than itself. Then he pulled the gun. "I'm not alone," Danny said. And even as he said it, the bell rang again, and 2 more men came through the door behind him, guns already out and through the front glass. Harper saw a third taking position outside, and she understood the shape of it instantly, that Danny had brought exactly enough men to take a woman, and not one more, because in his mind she was still underneath everything. A butcher and butchers were not supposed to be able to fight 4 armed men in a small room. "Down!" Harper shouted, and in the back office, exactly as he'd promised, Vincent dropped before she finished the word, and Harper killed the light over the counter, and the shop went black. And then Blake Prime Cuts the quiet shop. A dead man had left his heavy, underestimated daughter, became the single most dangerous room in the city of Boston because it was full of armed men who couldn't see, and one woman who had memorized every inch of it in the dark, moving among them with her father's knife, doing the thing she had sworn on her mother's grave she would never do, because an old woman had kissed her forehead and told her to come back. And a man she refused to name was crouched in the dark behind her, trusting her with his life, and the traitor who tried to burn all of it down had just made the same mistake every man made with Harper Blake. He'd stepped too close and called her soft and put his hand into a room full of knives. The first man died without ever knowing where she was. He'd come in behind Danny with his gun up and his eyes wide, sweeping the dark for a target. And that was his mistake, because a gun is only useful against a thing you can see, and in the black of the shop, he could see nothing, while Harper had spent 3 nights learning to move through that room blind. She came at him low and from the side, from an angle no one expects. And she took his wrist the way she'd taken Gino's, the way she'd taken Danny's in the warehouse. Except this time she did not stop at the wrist. Her father had taught her the whole motion, and she'd sworn never to finish it, and she finished it now once clean, and the man folded to the floor without a sound, and his gun slid away across the tile, and she was already gone before the others knew he was down. "Vito!" one of them hissed into the dark. "Vito, where are you?" "Silence! He killed the lights," Danny's voice tight now, the warmth long gone. "She's in here with us. Nobody shoot, you'll hit each other. Find the fuse box, get the lights." But Harper had already thought of that the way she thought of everything 3 moves early, and she'd pulled the fuse and taken it with her. And it was in her pocket now, so there would be no lights, not until she decided there would be. And that decision was hers, and hers alone. She moved to the second man by his breathing. He was younger and he was afraid, and fear makes a man breathe loud, and she found him near the display case with his back against the glass gun swinging at shadows. She didn't kill this one. She came up beside him, took the gun with one hand, and cracked her elbow into the hinge of his jaw with the other, and he dropped, and she caught the gun before it hit the floor, because a gun hitting the floor makes noise, and noise gives away position, and she set it down soft and moved on. 2 down, Danny, and 1 more inside, 1 outside. "Harper," Vincent's voice low from the office doorway, exactly where she told him to stay. "2 of them are down. I can hear it. Talk to me. Where do you want me?" "Stay down and stay quiet," she breathed back from somewhere he couldn't place, and she heard him go still. And she loved him for it, for being able to do the one hard thing, to sit in the dark and trust her and not play the hero, and she pushed the thought away, because there was still a killer in the room. "You hear that?" Danny said, and his voice had moved. He was circling toward the office, toward Vincent's voice, and Harper's blood went cold, because Danny was smart. Danny had heard Vincent, and Danny had just realized that the boss he'd spent 2 years betraying was crouched defenseless in the dark 20 feet away. "That's you, isn't it, Vincent? Hiding behind a woman. My God, after everything, you're hiding behind a butcher." "Danny," Vincent's voice steady, and Harper wanted to scream at him to be quiet. But she understood in the same instant what he was doing. He was drawing Danny toward himself and away from her, giving her the thing she needed most, which was Danny's back. 20 years my uncle trusted you. I made you my son's godfather." "Why?" "Because you were always going to lose," Danny said, moving toward the voice gun up, and Harper was moving too, now silent, closing the distance behind him. "Somebody was always going to take it from you, Vincent, so it might as well be somebody who loved you. That's the kindest version of this. I was going to make it quick. That was the plan, quick and clean, and I'd raise your boy like my own." "You will never," Harper said directly behind him, close enough to touch that child. Danny spun, and the gun came around, and Harper was already inside it, inside the arc, her hand on the barrel, forcing it up in a way as it went off the muzzle flash, a white knife of light in the dark that showed her. His face for one instant showed him hers, and then it was dark again, and she had the same wrist she'd had in the warehouse. And this time Danny knew what was coming and fought it with everything 2 years of patience and a lifetime of violence had given him. He was strong. He was faster than the others. He got a hand into her hair and slammed her head toward the steel table, and she turned with it, took it on the shoulder instead of the face, and drove her knee up into him, and they went down together into the dark 2 bodies on the floor of a butcher shop. And this was the fight her father had prepared her for her entire life. The one on the ground in the dark where size stops mattering and skill is the only thing left. "You're good," Danny grunted, getting a forearm across her throat. "You're real good, but you've never killed anybody who fought back. I can feel it. You hesitate. Your father—" "Don't," Harper said. "Talk about my father. and she stopped hesitating. She let him have her throat, let him lean his weight into it the way a strong man does when he thinks he's winning. And the second his weight committed, she took the arm he'd given her, the one across her neck, and she broke the elbow over her chest with a sound like a branch, and Danny screamed the real scream, the one under all the warmth, and she rolled him. And she was on top now, and her father's knife was in her hand and against his throat, and she stopped. She stopped breathing hard, the blade at his neck, and she felt him it felt him go still under her the way he had gone still in the warehouse. "There it is," Danny gasped, half laughing through the pain. "There's the hesitation. You can't. You're not him. You're just a butcher who learned some tricks, and you can't." The lights came on, not because of the fuse, because outside the third man, the one on the street, had heard the shot and come through the front door, and he'd found the fuse box by the entrance and slammed the spare back in. And now the shop was flooded with light, and Harper was on the floor with her knife at Danny's throat, and a fourth gunman was standing in the doorway with his weapon coming up to aim at her back. "Harper down," Vincent shouted. And Vincent Moretti, who had promised her he would not play the hero who had sworn he would do exactly what she said, broke that promise for the only reason she would ever have forgiven. Because the man in the doorway wasn't aiming at Vincent, he was aiming at her. And Vincent came out of the office in the light with the gun she hadn't known he'd brought and put himself between the doorway and her back and fired. The two shots came so close together, they were almost one sound. The man in the doorway went down, and Vincent staggered and put a hand against the wall, and Harper saw the red spreading across his side, and something happened inside her that had never happened in all the dark rooms of her life, something her father had never taught her, because her father had never felt it. A fear so total and so specific that for 1 second the whole world narrowed to the sight of Vincent Moretti's blood on his white shirt. Danny moved under her. He was fast, even with a broken arm, even beaten. He was a professional, and he took the 1/2 second her attention left him, and he bucked and reached for the fallen gun near the display case, and Harper felt him move and knew she had a choice, go to Vincent or stop Danny, and she could not do both. And the whole thing, the entire war, came down to that 1/2 second on the floor of her father's shop. She chose. She did not go to Vincent. She stayed on Danny because going to Vincent while Danny lived meant Danny killed them both. And the coldest, hardest, most loving thing she could do for the bleeding man against the wall was to end the man who'd shot him. And so Harper Blake did the thing she'd sworn on her mother's grave she would never do, the thing that had lived in her since she was 12 years old, and she was fast, and she was certain. And she did not hesitate, not this time, not with Vincent's blood on the floor. It was over in a moment, and then the shop was quiet, the terrible quiet after, and Harper was already off the body and across the floor and on her knees beside Vincent, her hands pressing against his shade against the warm red, and she was saying his name over and over in a voice she didn't recognize as her own. "Vincent, Vincent, look at me. Look at me. You promised me. You promised you'd do what I said, and I said don't step in front of me." "He was going to shoot you," Vincent said through his teeth, gray in the face but alive, his hand coming up to cover hers on the wound. "I did the math, same as you always do, fast and complete." He almost smiled. "You're not the only one who can make a choice, Harper Blake." "You idiot," Harper said, and her eyes were streaming, and she didn't care. She who had not cried in front of another human being since her father's funeral. "You beautiful idiot. Hold still. It went through. It's through the side. You're not going to die. Do you hear me? You are not allowed to die in my father's shop." "Wouldn't dream of it," Vincent breathed. "Bad for business." She pressed a clean towel to the wound, and her hands moving with the anatomical certainty her father had drilled into her, the same knowledge that could take a life used now to save one. And she got the bleeding slowed, and she called the one doctor in the city. Her father had trusted a man who asked no questions and took cash, and she stayed on the floor with Vincent's head in her lap while the shop cooled around them, and the truth of what had happened settled over them both. Danny was dead. The traitor was gone. The men he'd brought were down, and the boss and the butcher were alive on the floor in the light, both of them changed forever by a night that had stripped away every last thing either of them had been pretending to be. "Harper," Vincent said, weaker now, but present, his eyes on her face. "You went to him. When I got shot. You stayed on Danny instead of coming to me. I know. You chose the fight over me. I chose keeping you alive over comforting you while you died." Harper said, her voice raw. There's a difference. My father taught me the difference. It's the whole difference. She looked down at him. If I'd come to you, Danny kills us both, and your son grows up with no father and a godfather who murdered him. I stayed on Danny because I wasn't willing to lose you. Do you understand going to you would have been the selfish thing? Staying on him was the... She stopped because the word that came next was a word she'd been refusing for 3 weeks, and it was too big for the floor of a shop full of the dead. Was the what? Vincent said quietly. Later, Harper said. You can bleed or you can talk, Vincent. You don't get both. Pick one. He picked bleeding. He was smart that way. And he lay there with his head in the lap of the woman who'd walked into his world 3 weeks ago as a problem to be broken, who'd become the only person he trusted, who'd just killed for him and then refused to let herself say why, and even Gray and shot. And lying on a butcher shop floor, Vincent Moretti understood that everything in his life had just divided into before this woman and after her, and that he was never as long as he lived. Going back across that line. Outside sirens somewhere not coming here. The city going on the way it always did. Indifferent to the small, violent turning point that had just happened in a butcher shop in Southie. Inside Harper, Blake held pressure on a mafia boss's wound with hands her father had trained for exactly the opposite purpose, and stared at the far wall and let herself understand finally fully that she had not done any of this for a lever or for an old man named Delgado or for a promise or even for the frightened girl in the motel. She'd done the last part of it for him, and that terrified her more than any man with a gun ever had. Doctor's 12 minutes out, she said mostly to have something to say. Stay with me. I'm not going anywhere, Vincent said. I told you, bad for business. His hand found hers again, closed over it, warm and alive, and stubbornly refusing to let go. Besides, somebody's got to keep this street safe. And it turns out the woman who does that is the most dangerous person in Boston. He looked up at her and his eyes were clear despite everything. I'm not letting her out of my sight. Harper looked down at him, at the blood, at the stubborn, alive warmth of him, and did not answer because the answer was the thing too big for the floor. And it would have to wait, all of it would have to wait until the shop was clean and the boss was healed and she could stand in front of him, whole, and decide what she was and what they were and what a butcher and a mafia boss did with the impossible thing that had grown up between them in 3 weeks of blood and dark. For now, she just held on, and she did not let go. The doctor came in 12 minutes exactly as promised, and he worked on Vincent on the same steel table, where Harper broke down her cuts, and he told her the bullet had gone clean through the meat of his side without touching anything that would kill him. And Harper stood over both of them with her father's knife cleaned and back in its sheath and did not leave the room once. He's lucky, the doctor said, stitching. An inch to the left, and we'd be having a different conversation. He's not lucky, Harper said. He's stubborn. There's a difference. Vincent, gray but conscious, half laughed and then hissed as the needle pulled. She keeps saying that. There's a difference about everything. Lucky and stubborn, necessary and stupid. It's exhausting. It's the truth, Harper said. The truth is exhausting. That's why so few people bother with it. The doctor finished and packed his bag and took the cash Harper handed him and paused at the door. He was an old man, older than her father would have been, and he'd been doing this a long time, patching up people who couldn't go to hospitals. And he looked at Harper for a moment with something like recognition. You held pressure like someone who's done it before, he said. You know your anatomy. My father was a butcher, Harper said. The old doctor said in the voice of a man who'd known a lot of butchers who were never only butchers, and he left and did not ask another question, and that was why her father had trusted him. Then it was just the two of them, and the quiet and the long, slow work of dawn coming up over a shop that would need cleaning before it could ever open again. Vincent watched her from the table. You didn't sleep. Neither did you. I got shot. I have an excuse. He shifted, winced, kept his eyes on her. You've been standing in the same spot for 3 hours, Harper. You can sit down. The war's over. Danny's gone. It's done. It's not done, Harper said, and she meant the shop, the bodies that had already been quietly taken away by men Vincent had called the blood on her father's floor, the mess that had to be made right. But she also meant something else, and Vincent heard the something else because he'd learned to hear her the way she'd learned to read him. Come here, he said. Vincent, I'm not going to try anything. I can barely sit up. Come here, please. And it was the please that moved her because Vincent Moretti did not say please. She'd learned that about him too. So she crossed the room and stood beside the table where he lay, and he reached up with his good hand and took hers, and for a moment neither of them said anything. "You were going to say something," Vincent said, "on the floor. After. You said the reason you stayed on Danny instead of coming to me was because staying was the something, and then you said later. It's later, Harper. The sun's coming up. We're both alive. It's later." Harper looked down at their hands, his around hers, and she felt the whole weight of 10 years of being alone pressing up against the things she'd been refusing to name, and she was tired, too tired to hold it back the way she usually could. "I stayed on Danny because I love you," she said. There, that's the something, and that's the word too big for the floor. "I stayed on him because if I'd lost you, I don't think I'd have come back from it, and I couldn't let that happen. So I finished him first, and I hated every second that you were bleeding while I did it. That's the truth. It's exhausting. You wanted it, you've got it." The shop was silent. "Say it again," Vincent said quietly. "Absolutely not," Harper said. "I'm not Gino. I don't say things twice for men who want to hear themselves." "Please," she stopped. She looked at him, this man, this dangerous, broken, stubborn, honest man who'd walked into her father's shop to break her and had instead handed her the first real thing she'd felt in a decade. And she understood that she was done being afraid of it, that a woman who'd killed for him on the floor of her own shop had lost the right to be shy about a word. "I love you," Harper said. "God help me. Of all the men in this city, the one I could never explain to my father, the one whose whole world I've spent my life trying to stay out of. I love you, Vincent Moretti, and it's the most inconvenient thing that's ever happened to me." And Vincent Moretti shot stitched gray with blood loss on a butcher's table at dawn, smiled the smile she'd seen the first day, the one that wasn't a boss's smile and wasn't a frightened man's smile, the one that was just recognition, just one underestimated person seeing another. And he said, "Well, that's convenient, because I've been in love with you since you told me I was holding my knife wrong. You weren't holding a knife that day." "I know," Vincent said. "That's how in love I was. I was already remembering it wrong." She laughed. She hadn't meant to. It came out of her in a rush, the first real laugh in weeks, maybe years, and it broke something loose in her chest that had been locked so long she'd forgotten it could open. And she bent down and pressed her forehead to his, careful of the wound, and they stayed like that while the light came up. But this is not a story about two people falling in love on a butcher's table, and Harper knew it even in that moment, because loving Vincent and living with what loving Vincent meant were two entirely different things, and the second one was going to cost her something she wasn't sure she was willing to pay. She pulled back. "Here's the thing, though," she said, "and I need you to hear it now, while you're too weak to argue well." She stepped back from the table out of reach because she needed the distance to say it. "I love you, but I am not going to become one of them. I am not going to be the boss's woman. I'm not going to sit at your table and smile while men who'd sell you for a nickel call me Mrs. Moretti and wonder what I did before. I watch what your world does to people. I watched it turn a man who took a bullet for you into a man who'd murder your son. I am not moving into that, Vincent. Not for you, not for anyone." Vincent was quiet. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying I have conditions," Harper said. "The same as the first day. I told you the first day I don't do this halfway, and I meant it about the war, and I mean it about this too." She folded her arms. "This street stays free. That was the deal, and it holds forever whatever happens between us. Delgado never pays another cent. Mrs. Okafor shops here till the day she dies without ever knowing how close it came. That's not negotiable, and it never was." "Done," Vincent said. "It was always done." "Second," she held his eyes, "I keep the shop. I don't become a decoration in your life. Blake Prime Cut stays open. I stand behind that counter every morning at 6, and I am a butcher, Vincent. That's who I am. Not the ghost in the dark, not your enforcer, not your fixer. The dark thing my father put in me, it go back in the drawer after tonight and it stays there. And I only take it out again if this street is threatened. I will not spend my life killing for you. I did it once. I'll never regret it. But once is where it stops." "Done," Vincent said again, quieter. "And third," and here her voice changed, went from the woman laying out terms to something more careful, more human, because this was the one that mattered. "I don't belong to you. Whatever this is, whatever we are, I am not a thing you own or protect or keep. I spent my whole life being underestimated by men who thought I was soft, and then you came along and then you were the first one who saw what I actually was. And I will not let you turn around now and start treating me like something delicate just because you love me. The day you step in front of me to protect me, and it isn't a life or death half second like last night, the day you decide what's too dangerous for me, that's the day I'm gone. I hold my own knife. I always have. That doesn't change because you're in my bed instead of across my counter with a threat. Vincent looked at her for a long moment, and then he did something that surprised her, which was hard to do because very little surprised Harper Blake anymore. He pushed himself up off the table, against the doctor's orders, against the pain, gray-faced and gritting his teeth, until he was sitting upright and then standing, swaying one hand on the steel for balance so that he could face her on his feet instead of on his back. "What are you doing?" Harper said. "Sit down, you'll tear the stitches." "No," Vincent said. "You don't get to lay all that out while I'm lying down. You want to talk to me as an equal. You talk to me standing up." He steadied himself. His eyes found hers and held. "I agree to all of it. The street, the shop, all of it. But you're wrong about one thing, and I'm going to correct you the same way you've corrected me this whole time. Fast and complete." "What am I wrong about?" "You think I want to protect you," Vincent said. "You think loving you means I'll try to put you behind glass, keep you safe, make you small. That's what your whole life taught you love from a man looks like. Control dressed up as care. Your mother lived it. Danny weaponized it, offering to keep the girl safe, offering to raise my son, always the protector, always the one deciding what's best for everyone else." His voice was rough with blood loss, but the words were clear. "I don't want to protect you, Harper. I've seen you work. Protecting you would be like protecting a hurricane. It'd be insulting, and it'd get me killed." "Then what do you want?" "I want to stand next to you," Vincent said. "That's it. That's the whole thing. Not in front of you, not behind you, next to you. I want the one person in this city who'll tell me the truth, who'll do the right thing when it costs her, who held pressure on a wound with the same hand she just killed a man with, because she does the necessary thing and not the easy one. I don't want a woman to protect. I want a partner who can kill me before I finish a sentence and chooses not to every single day. That's not something you protect, Harper. That's something you're lucky to stand beside." The shop was very quiet. Harper looked at him swaying and bleeding and stubbornly, impossibly on his feet, and she felt the last locked thing in her open, the thing even Mrs. Okafor's kiss hadn't quite reached the belief she'd carried since she was a heavy 9-year-old, that the best she could ever hope for was to be tolerated, useful, safe, and never not once in her life chosen as an equal by someone who saw the whole of her and wanted exactly that. "You're going to fall over," she said, because it was easier than what she was feeling. "Probably," Vincent said. "You'll catch me or you won't. Your choice. That's kind of the point." She crossed the room. She caught him. She got her shoulder under his arm and took his weight, all of it, the way she'd taken every weight her whole life. And this time it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a thing she'd chosen, and he leaned on her and let her hold him up, a mafia boss, trusting his whole weight to a butcher. And neither of them thought it was strange at all. "Sit down before you die," Harper said. "We can be equals tomorrow. Tonight you're a patient, and I'm the one who knows anatomy." "Bossy," Vincent murmured. "Necessary," and Harper said. "There's a difference." She got him back onto the table. The days after were quieter than she expected. Vincent healed slowly, stubbornly at her place above the shop, because he refused to convalesce in a house full of men he now knew he couldn't fully trust. And Harper cleaned the shop board by board and reopened it and stood behind the counter at 6 in the morning, the way she'd promised herself she would, and it turned out the dark thing did go back in the drawer, and it turned out she could put it there. And that was the thing she'd been most afraid of, and it was the thing that came easiest. Mrs. Okafor came in the first morning she reopened and stopped inside the door and looked at Harper for a long moment. "You came back," she said. "I told you I would." "You didn't actually. You very carefully didn't." The old woman came to the counter and gripped Harper's forearm the way she always did, hard, and her eyes were wet. "But you're here, and I'm not going to ask what happened because I'm old, and I've learned that the questions you don't ask are how you get to keep the people you love." She patted Harper's hand. "Give me a Sunday roast. My grandchildren are coming." "It's Tuesday, Mrs. Okafor." "They're always coming," the old woman said. That's the whole point of grandchildren. And she smiled, and Harper smiled, and the street went on free, now safe now in a way none of them would ever fully know they owed to a heavy, quiet woman with her father's knife in a drawer. Sal made one move 3 weeks later, the way Harper had known someone eventually would, testing the wounded boss, probing to see if the new head of the family was weak enough to take. He came with 2 men to a meeting he thought would be an ambush. He found Vincent healed and calm and completely unafraid, sitting at the head of the table with a woman standing behind his right shoulder that no one recognized, a plus-size woman in plain clothes who watched the room the way a butcher watches a side of beef, deciding where it comes apart. "Who's this?" Sal said, uneasy without knowing why. "Since when do you bring civilians to the table?" "She's not a civilian," Vincent said. "She's my partner. And before you do whatever you came here to do, Sal, I want you to know that everything that happened to Danny, the warehouse, all of it, that was her. So think very carefully about your next sentence, because she's the reason I'm alive, and you're the reason I'm in a bad mood." Sal looked at Harper. Harper looked at Sal. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Sal had spent 40 years in this world learning to read the temperature of a room, learning who was dangerous and who only pretended to be, and he looked at the calm, heavy woman standing behind Vincent's shoulder, with her hands loose and her eyes flat and working, and every instinct he'd built over 4 decades told him the same thing Gino had learned, the same thing Danny had learned too late. The most dangerous person in the room was the one everyone underestimated. "I came to pledge my loyalty," Sal said, "to the new boss and his partner." "No, you didn't," Vincent said. "No," Sal agreed, "but I'm going to anyway." He left, and that was the last time anyone at that table ever wondered whether Vincent Moretti was weak, because the story of the butcher went around the way the story of Gino had gone around, mouth to mouth, bigger each time. And every version ended the same way, with the same warning: don't touch the woman behind the boss. She's not what she looks like. None of them ever are. That night, Harper stood in the shop after closing the lights off the street, quiet outside, and Vincent came down from upstairs and stood beside her, healed now, whole now, and they looked out the front glass at the neighborhood together. "You did it," he said. "Delgado, Mrs. Okafor, all of them, free, forever. You actually did it." "We did it," Harper said, and this time the "we" came easy and she didn't flinch at it. "You know what I keep thinking about," Vincent said. "The first day, I walked in here to break you. I brought 2 men. I had a whole speech about consequences, and you just kept cutting meat like I wasn't even there." He shook his head slowly. "I thought I was the most dangerous thing that had ever walked into this shop." "You were the second most dangerous thing," Harper said. "You just didn't know it yet." He reached for her hand in the dark, and she let him take it, and they stood there, the boss and the butcher's 2 people. The whole world had spent its time underestimating, finally standing exactly where they'd each fought their whole lives to stand next to someone who saw the truth of them and wanted it, not despite what it was, but because of it. "So what happens now?" Vincent said. And Harper Blake, daughter of a legendary underworld cleaner, butcher of South Boston, the woman who'd put a knife to a mafia boss's throat and ended up holding his hand, turned to face him in the dark of her father's shop. And she told him the truth, the way she always had, the way she always would, because the truth was the only foundation either of them had ever been able to build on. "Now nothing happens to this street that I don't allow," she said. "Now you run your world and I run mine. And where they meet as equals. And if you ever forget that, if you ever try to put me behind glass, I walk out that door and I never look back, and you'll have learned the last lesson I'll ever teach you." She stepped close to him, close enough to feel his heartbeat, and she was not afraid, and she had never once in this whole thing been afraid. "I don't belong to you, Vincent. I never will. I'm not the woman behind the boss. I'm not the thing you protect. I am the one holding the knife, and I always have been. And the day you understood, that was the day you stopped being a man I had to survive and became a man I could stand beside." Vincent looked at her for a long moment in the dark. And then he smiled, not with dominance, not with control, but with the pure, clean recognition of a man who had finally, after a lifetime of being surrounded by people who feared him or wanted something from him, found the one person in the world who could kill him before he finished a sentence, and chose every single day to stand beside him instead. "Good," he said. "I never wanted the knife, Harper. I only ever wanted the woman holding it." And in a butcher shop in South Boston, where a heavy, quiet girl had once been told she was soft, Two of the most dangerous people in the city stood together in the dark as equals, and no one ever underestimated Harper Blake again. A month after the night in the shop on an ordinary Thursday, a woman Harper had never seen before walked into Blake Prime Cuts at closing time and stood just inside the door without speaking. She was young, maybe 20, thin in the way that comes from worry and not from choice, and she held her purse with both hands like it was the only solid thing in her life. Harper knew the look. She'd worn it herself once, a long time ago, before she learned to stop showing it. "We're closing," Harper said, not unkindly. "But I've got a few minutes. What do you need?" "You're her," the girl said. "You're the butcher, the one people talk about." Harper set down her cloth. "People say a lot of things. They say if the men come, if the men who take money come, you're the one who tells them no." The girl's voice shook. "They say you're the reason this street doesn't pay anymore. I have a bakery 3 blocks over. It's outside your street. And they came yesterday and they hurt my brother, and I don't have anyone, and I heard about you and I didn't know where else to." She stopped because she'd started to cry, and she was clearly ashamed of it. Harper came around the counter. She didn't hurry. She pulled out the stool, the one she kept for herself and almost never used, and she guided the girl onto it the same way she'd guided old Mr. Delgado onto it the day this whole thing started, and she crouched down so the girl wouldn't have to look up. "What's your name?" Harper said. "Sophia. And your brother. He's going to be all right. Broken ribs. They said next time it'd be worse. They said we pay Friday or they burn us out." Sophia wiped her face with the back of her hand. "I don't have anyone, Miss Blake. Our parents are gone. It's just us. And I know it's not your street. I know I have no right to come here, but I didn't know who else." "Which family?" Harper said. Which family sent them?" "The men. Were they Moretti?" Sophia shook her head. "No, I asked around. They said it's someone new, someone moving in from outside, taking the streets nobody protects. They said his name is—" "Don't," Harper said. "Don't say it here. Not out loud." She stood up and she went to the front door and she locked it and turned the sign, and Sophia watched her do it with wide, frightened eyes, not understanding, and Harper came back and stood in front of her. "Here's what's going to happen," Harper said. "You're going to go home tonight, and you're going to lock your doors, and you're going to take care of your brother, and you're not going to worry about Friday. Because Friday isn't going to come the way they told you it would." "You'll help me," Sophia breathed. "But it's not your street. Why would you?" And Harper Blake, who had spent 10 years wanting nothing but to be left alone, who had put the dark thing back in the drawer and told herself it would only ever come out again to protect her own street, understood in that moment that the drawer had never really been about the street at all. "Sit here a second," she said. "I want to show you something." She went to the back to the office, to the bottom drawer that stuck, and she took out the thing wrapped in oilcloth, and she carried it out front, and she set it on the counter and unwrapped it. Her father's knife, the one that had never cut food. She looked at it for a long moment, at the worn handle her father's hand had shaped at the blade that had ended a man on this very floor. "My father gave me this," Harper said. "He taught me to use it, and he cried when he did it because he didn't want me to be what he was. He wanted me to be safe. He wanted me to keep my head down and hand over the envelope and never make anybody angry, because that's what he thought love looked like, keeping me small so nobody would ever have a reason to come for me." She wrapped the knife back up slow. "It took me my whole life to understand he was wrong. Not about the danger. He was right about the danger. He was wrong that the answer was to be small." "I don't understand," Sophia said. "You will," Harper said. "You came to a stranger's shop at closing time, crying ashamed, sure you had no right. That's exactly where I was once. And somebody could have told me to keep my head down, and instead—" She paused. "Instead, nobody helped me, and I decided a long time ago that if I ever got strong enough, I wasn't going to be the kind of strong that only protects itself. Your street's not my street. Neither was Delgado's, really. It's just the street I happen to stand on. But strength that only guards its own corner isn't strength. It's just a bigger kind of hiding." She picked up her phone. Vincent answered on the second ring the way he always did. "It's late. You never call this late unless something's wrong." "Nothing's wrong," Harper said. "Something's about to be right. There's someone new moving on the streets nobody protects. Small businesses, no family, no muscle. They hurt a kid 3 blocks from here yesterday, broke his ribs, told his sister to pay Friday or burn. A pause. That's not our territory. I know. That's not our problem, Harper. I know that too, Harper said, and then quieter. But I'm making it mine, and I'm asking you to make it yours, not as the boss expanding his territory, as the man who stands next to the woman who won't watch a scared kid pay for being alone. She looked at Sophia, who was watching her with something like awe. You told me you didn't want to protect me. You wanted to stand next to me. So stand next to me on this. There's a girl in my shop who reminds me of me, and I'm not going to let her learn the lesson I learned the hard way. Nobody's coming to save her, so we go be the somebody. The line was quiet for a long moment. You know, Vincent said, when I took this chair, I thought the whole job was holding on to what my family already had, squeezing it, protecting it. A breath. You've turned me into something my uncle wouldn't recognize. Is that a no? That's a give me 20 minutes, Vincent said. I'm bringing the car and Harper. She heard the smile in his voice, the real one, the recognition. This is the version of my world I could actually live with. The one where the most dangerous people on the street are the ones who use it to protect the people who can't protect themselves. Nobody's ever built one like that. It probably can't last. Then we build it anyway, Harper said. My father used to say, the living have work to do. This is the work. This is the work I actually want. She hung up. Sophia was staring at her. Who was that? Someone who's going to help, Harper said. Go home, Sophia. Take care of your brother. And when this is over, when your bakery is safe, you're going to do one thing for me. Anything. Someday, Harper said, there's going to be another scared kid somewhere who thinks they have no one and no right to ask. And you're going to remember what it felt like to walk into a stranger's shop at closing time. And you're not going to tell them to keep their head down. She helped the girl up off the stool. You're going to be the somebody. That's how it works. That's the only way it ever works. It just keeps getting passed on. Sophia left, and for the first time since she'd walked in, she wasn't holding her purse like it was the only solid thing in her life, because she'd found something more solid, which was the knowledge that she wasn't alone anymore. Harper stood in the empty shop and waited for the sound of Vincent's car, and she thought about her father, and for the first time in 10 years, she thought she finally understood him and forgave him and moved past him all at once. He'd given her the knife to keep her safe. He'd meant it as armor, and she'd spent a decade treating it that way, a thing to hide a thing to protect only herself in her own small corner. But a thing that only protects itself was exactly what Danny had been, what Sal was, what every man in that world had always been, guarding their own with everything they had and calling it strength. And it had never made a single one of them anything but afraid. The knife wasn't armor. She understood that now. It was never meant to be armor. It was a promise that the people who couldn't hold their own would have someone standing between them and the dark. Her father had been that someone for the wrong people, for money and shadows, and it had eaten him alive. But the tool didn't care whose hand held it or why. In her hand, for these people on these streets, it could mean something he'd never let it mean. Vincent's car pulled up outside. She heard the door. Harper picked up the oilcloth bundle from the counter. She didn't put it back in the drawer this time. She slid it into the sheath at the small of her back where it belonged, where it would stay now, not as a secret, not as a burden, but as the thing she'd finally chosen to be. The bell over the door rang, the one her father hung the year she was born, and Vincent stepped in, healed and calm, and hers, and he looked at her standing there ready, and he didn't ask if she was sure, because he'd learned better than to ask Harper Blake if she was sure. Where to was all he said. 3 blocks over, Harper said. There's a bakery that's going to still be standing on Friday. She walked to him and she took his hand, and they stepped out into the night together. The boss and the butcher, and the door closed behind them on a shop that would open again at 6 in the morning, the way it always did, because no matter what she was underneath, no matter what she carried at the small of her back, Harper Blake was a butcher. And she would always come back to stand behind that counter at dawn. But tonight there was work to do, the living kind, the kind she'd chosen. And somewhere 3 blocks over, a scared girl locked her doors and held her broken brother and waited for a Friday that was never going to come the way they'd promised it would, because a heavy, quiet woman she'd met at closing time had decided once and for all that being underestimated was not a weakness to survive, but a weapon to wield, and that the strongest thing a person could ever do with a knife was stand in front of someone who didn't have one. Harper Blake had spent her whole life being told she was soft. She had finally learned that softness, the real kind, the kind that runs toward the frightened stranger instead of away, was the most dangerous and most beautiful thing she would ever hold. And she held it now the same way she held everything completely, without flinching and without ever once letting go.